as well. Isak arrived, as you mentioned, around about 20 to 10 this morning. He's the only first team player at the training ground behind me at this moment in time. The rest of the squad and Eddie Howe landed back from South Korea about an hour before we saw Alexander drive in here. They landed at Newcastle airport and they have the day off because they've travelled through the night on a flight that was slightly delayed as well. So you can only imagine he got a very tired manager Eddie Howe and a tired squad as well. But Alexander Isak himself, yes, he arrived here this morning. Of course, the official line from the club is that he's got a thigh injury. So is he here for treatment perhaps on that injury? We have been reporting, as you rightly say, that he's considering his transfer options this summer. We know that Liverpool have had a bid rejected already, £110 million plus add-ons. Newcastle United are adamant they want 150 million. That's the number that we've been reporting. That's what we've been told. So will Liverpool come back with a higher offer? Where does it stand with Alexander Isak? We know that Newcastle are circling for replacements as well. So it's all very live. It's all happening at this moment in time. And the coming days, you would imagine, and hours even potentially, are key.
Yeah, and Eddie Howe is clearly going to want to be talking to Alexander Isak about this situation, trying to straighten it out one way or another. When do we expect that to happen with Eddie Howe? Because he certainly fired a bit of a warning last night to his striker.
Spot on, Tom, he did. I mean, I'll read the quotes here. He was speaking to the press last night. He spoke to the Daily Mail and he was very strong in what he said. Uncharacteristically strong, I think. He said, "You have to earn the right to train with us. We are Newcastle United. We will make sure that any player does that to earn the right to train with the group. No player can expect to act poorly and train with the group as normal." That last bit, I think, is really interesting with regards to Isak. We know that he hasn't been out in Asia with the squad. We know that there's talk of this thigh injury, but of course, you can't deny the transfer talk which is surrounding the player as well. It's put the whole sort of first team squad in a difficult situation. They've had to go on pre-season without the top striker, so it's been difficult. They performed well against Tottenham yesterday, 1-1 draw, but they played incredibly well, I thought, on the day. And it's just this whole issue of Isak sort of overshadowed everything. Everywhere Eddie Howe's had to go and speak to the media, the first questions he's getting asked, of course, are about Alexander Isak. So I expect he'll catch up with him. I don't think it's going to be today. As I said, Eddie Howe's flown through the night on a delayed flight. They landed early this morning. The squad have got a day off. I'd be very surprised at this stage if Eddie Howe were to arrive here now and meet with Alexander Isak today. If that was going to happen, my gut feeling is that would have happened already. However, we're here. We'll keep an eye on it. Could it happen tomorrow? I think the players are all back in full on Wednesday. So Wednesday could be a key day, whether or not Alexander Isak is able to then train alongside his teammates. But as you mentioned right at the top, Newcastle are in the market looking for a striker or two. I mean, before the window even opened, there was a suggestion that they needed two centre-forwards to come into the group. Callum Wilson, of course, has left the club. He signed for West Ham. He was a free agent after his contract expired. The situation around Isak, with the season getting closer all the time, makes it a very tricky period this for Eddie Howe and Newcastle United. They need a strong squad this season, with Champions League football, of course, as well on the menu for the club this season. So you understand why they're looking at the likes of, you mentioned Benjamin Sesko, who's a key target for Eddie Howe. Whether or not Isak stays or not, I'm sure Newcastle will still be going for Benjamin Sesko. He's 22, he's a top player, he's someone that the club feel would be an adequate replacement for Isak should he leave either this summer or further down the line. You've got a player here, if Sesko were to join, that could fill his void. And of course there are other strikers on Eddie Howe's wish list as well.
Yeah, I think strikers are on a lot of managers' wish lists at the moment. Pete, thank you. We'll just mention outgoing from Newcastle, by the way, because their goalkeeper, Martin Dubravka, has emerged as a primary target for Burnley, and talks with Newcastle are understood to be progressing over a permanent deal. Remember that Burnley lost James Trafford to Manchester City, so in the market for a goalkeeper, and it looks like it's going to be Newcastle United's Martin Dubravka, who've signed Aaron Ramsdale. Anyway, Newcastle, so they're strong in the goalkeeper department. Right, Kevin and Dan, good afternoon to you. The Isak situation, let's go back to that, because we didn't talk about it too much on Good Morning Transfers. How much did the Isak situation take you by surprise?
Yeah, a little bit, because we were starting to hear towards the end of last season that he was a dream target for Liverpool. He was one that they absolutely wanted to bring in if that opportunity came up. Of course, at that stage, we weren't sure of the scale of the spending that Liverpool were going to unveil. But I felt as soon as Newcastle nailed down that Champions League spot, that was probably the end of it, at least for another year. The only thing that was going to change the dynamic was if Isak really pushed for the move himself. So I must admit, I am surprised by the turn that it's taken. And we see this time and time again. It is difficult once a player seems to have made their mind up about moving. It's difficult to keep hold of them.
Dan, whether you're doing it from the manager's perspective, a fan's perspective, it's quite difficult on Isak, isn't it? Because there's, on the one hand, you say, well, he doesn't want to be there and he's worth a lot of money. So get rid, he's being disruptive. That might be one way that you look at it. Another way is, he's worth the money. So why not give him a new contract and keep him? And you've got to weigh that up, regardless of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, Tom, this really isn't great for either party. I mean, Pete touched on it there from the Newcastle training ground, where this was a summer where you really thought they were going to build on what they accomplished last season, achieving Champions League football, trying to really compete in the league as well as European football's, finest competition. And they haven't been able to do that in this transfer window just yet. And then your star player, Alexander Isak, is giving you every indication that he wants to explore his options. That, again, isn't ideal. And let's not also forget that Newcastle are without a sporting director at this present moment since Paul Mitchell has left the club. And so that just has led to a bit of disarray at the club throughout this transfer window. And to give you a bit more context, I mean, it's very interesting. Newcastle United legend Alan Shearer, on his podcast with Gary Lineker and Micah Richards this morning, spoke a little bit about it. And he said, I thought he might have stayed in terms of Alexander Isak for another season before this would have happened. But Shearer's perspective is, no individual is bigger than any football club. If he doesn't want to be there, fine, get what you can for him and say thank you very much for the memories, off you go. And I think Shearer's perspective is very much that they need to start going and prepare for this Premier League season, because we all know how difficult the window can be once the season is underway, especially if the first few results don't go your way in the season. Clubs become slightly more desperate to really address those deficiencies in your side. So to really conclude, Tom, not ideal for either party.
Yeah, they are trying though, Newcastle, aren't they? Because there's another man up there, Benjamin Sesko, alongside Alexander Isak. Let's just give you the latest. Newcastle and Manchester United, both in talks with RB Leipzig over signing him. No official bid from Manchester United yet. Sesko's understood to be open to both clubs, all right? So that's where we stand with Sesko. Kevin, if you are a top club and you need a striker, is Sesko the obvious choice, especially when you consider that his asking price seems to be kind of set in stone?
I think he is, if you're looking for somebody not just in the short term but in the long term, because I think he's somebody that will develop over the next few years. I think the thing that really attracts clubs to him is the fact that he's a physical outlier, in the sense that he's tall, so he's great in the air, but he's got that pace as well, and he's actually quite adept technically as well. We've seen him score some spectacular goals, all types of goals. He's somebody that thrived in a poor Leipzig team last season, able to score goals in the Bundesliga and the Champions League. He's not the finished article yet. He doesn't have the breadth of experience as some of the strikers on the market, but in terms of a long-term bet, I can understand why Manchester United and Newcastle are interested.
But Kevin, in terms of Sesko, I mean, I just wonder, for Newcastle, Manchester United, what kind of striker would they be getting? Because when we look at these statistics here, I mean, the real positive is, feels like he can score an array of different types of goals.
Yeah, he could be creative, he could bring others into play. As I say, he's good in the air, and he should be because of how tall he is. He's great in transition as well, because he carries the ball incredibly well. He's got the skill to take people on. But he also scores really imaginative goals as well. Scored a brilliant goal against Bayern towards the end of the season with the outside of his boot. He scored some brilliant Zlatan-esque volleys as well. So he has got the lot. It's just about, can he be more consistent? Can he tidy up some of the link play as well? Some of it's good, but some of it leaves a bit to be desired. And can he tidy up the decision-making? With the right coaching, I think he can really make a step.
everybody, not everybody, but most clubs do seem to want a striker. If you are at the top end, what strikers are out there? You know European football probably more than anybody. So who else is there?
I think a lot of clubs have missed the boat with Osimhen. It baffles me that he was able to go to Galatasaray, with all respect to them, and they've done a brilliant job in turning that loan into a permanent move, because they made him feel wanted from the get-go. As soon as he arrived in Istanbul, you are our guy, we want to keep you if we can. They've been on the charm offensive, and it's worked. He's played regularly, he was a top scorer in the Turkish Super League, scored 37 goals in all competitions, and he wanted somebody to really make him their top player. And I can't understand why Premier League clubs didn't go for him. I know the overall financial package was big, but Napoli were prepared to do that deal at €75 million, which is a lot less than his release clause was. And I just think, if you want a proven scorer who's physical, who's hardworking, I think he was the obvious choice. He's gone. So you look at some others on the market. You look at Gonzalo Ramos, who PSG do not have in their starting 11. They have him as a member of the squad. Rondal Kolomuani's being linked with a permanent move to Juventus from PSG, but there's a bit haggling there. That hasn't happened yet, and he was hot property at one stage. You look at somebody like Vangelis Pavlidis. Now, he's not a name that might leap off the page, but he's been scoring buckets of goals for Benfica. He scored a double for Greece against England at Wembley, led them to a famous win. He got a hat-trick against Barcelona in the Champions League last season, albeit a game they managed to lose 5-4 somehow, but he did get a hat-trick in that game. So there are strikers out there. Dusan Vlahovic, Juventus, because he's so expensive wage-wise, want to get him off the wage bill. So there might be a bargain there in terms of the overall package. There are strikers out there, but Sesko, I think, is at the top of many clubs' list because of his long-term potential.
A lot of talk about Ollie Watkins as well, more close to home as well. Right, much more on that to come. But a reminder of the breaking news from the Oval. India beat England by 6 runs to win the 5th test and tie the series at 2-2. But next on Transfer Talk, we'll discuss outgoings at Manchester United, and we've got a development on Darwin Núñez's future. only one at Liverpool. Who else could leave when it comes to generating funds?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we know, Liverpool have been so good in terms of the selling market, as well as bringing in all of these big names for substantial fees like Florian Wirtz this window especially. But in terms of departures, I think one that looks more increasingly likely is the young midfielder Tyler Morton. We understand that Liverpool are in talks with Lyon over a possible move, and Morton, just 22 years old, has really attracted interest from all around Europe, the likes of Strasbourg, West Ham, Braga as well. So a lot of admirers for the young midfielder, but it seems he could be going to France, and we understand that any deal could be worth around £15 million. But if we're just playing around a little bit, looking at Liverpool's squad, other potential departures where they could raise funds, I think you'd look at the likes of Federico Chiesa, who really struggled, although that move last summer felt a bit more of a punt by Liverpool to see if he could recapture some of that magic he had earlier in his career. That didn't quite work out. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'd also look at someone like Harvey Elliott, who once again won the Euros with the under-21s in the summer, is incredibly good at that level and has showed glimpses of being effective for Liverpool, but maybe not as consistent as he would like. You think he might benefit from a move just to start consistently, especially in a World Cup year. And I think maybe we don't speak about that enough with some of these transfers, that at the back of all of these players' minds, they are thinking about next summer's World Cup and where are they best placed to get as many minutes as they can to make an impression on their national side.
It's a really big concern for a lot of players, I think. The Tyler Morton thing's really interesting because Paulo Fonseca, the Lyon coach, has already talked about what he could potentially bring to the team, really likes his passing range, really likes the fact that he can play in tight spaces, and he believes he'll fit in with what Lyon are trying to do. And Lyon are in Europe and they haven't been relegated, so that's a huge plus. They came very close to being administratively relegated, but they managed to sort the finances out. So there's a bit of wheelie dealing to do for them, but I think that could be a really good sign.
Can I just ask you, Darwin Núñez, obviously in England maybe hasn't worked out after that £85 million move, but would his style, would his stature fit Italian football? You know, if he goes to AC Milan, if that does happen, we've seen some Premier League players go there in recent years.
I think it could do. I think what's interesting, though, is I don't think Milan are prepared to pay what Al Hilal would be prepared to pay. So is that going to potentially slow that down? Because the feeling was that Núñez was keen on staying in European football. And so there might be a bit of toing and froing there. Milan have been linked with Dusan Vlahovic, who we mentioned, bringing him across from Juventus. But again, that's a financial thing. Are they prepared to pay the kind of wages he would want? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Are Milan willing to go to the same level Al Hilal are?
And so players could be leaving Liverpool to generate funds, but in terms of what they've brought in so far, Kevin, I mean, Hugo Ekitike, Florian Wirtz, Milan Kirkez, you've got Frimpong as well. What have you made of their business in general?
It's an unbelievable window. And it's a real statement, I think, because it's building from a position of strength. I think Frimpong will give them real dynamism and a different option on that right-hand side. He's come on leaps and bounds in his time at Bayer Leverkusen. And I think with him, it's not just about what he brings to the pitch, it's about the intangibles as well. What I mean about that is he's got infectious enthusiasm, he's a real team player, and I think he's somebody that was a really important voice in that dressing room, actually, at Bayer Leverkusen. But the one to take the breath away is Wirtz, for so many reasons. Because the feeling in Germany for a long, long time was that if he was going anywhere, it was Bayern. And Bayern had pretty much bet the farm on getting him. Uli Hoeneß, the honorary president, had been talking to the Wirtz camp. Bayern were pretty sure that this was going to happen. Whatever Arne Slot was able to say to him, however he was able to pitch Liverpool, it clearly worked. We're talking about one of the most exciting attacking players in Europe. The touch, the imagination, the willingness to work without the ball, the versatility, he has it all. And he also is a really fierce competitor. He might look like he's not the most robust, but this is a guy who's already come back from a serious ACL injury and looked better than he did before. I think they've got a really exciting signing on their hands there.
And I think the fans are also excited about Hugo Ekitike. And I've been doing this show for a lot of years. His name has always come up, and he's never come to the Premier League until now. Just talk us through his career.
So he was at Reims and looked really good. And so that's when the likes of Newcastle, Liverpool, a few Premier League clubs were linked with him. He made the move to PSG, and that was the wrong move. He went too early, I think. They had so many attacking resources, and he just couldn't get in on a regular basis. Ironically, that's the kind of move that would better suit what PSG are trying to do now. He went to Eintracht Frankfurt, and as soon as he made that move, you could see the quality come through because he was playing on a regular basis. What I loved about his spell at Frankfurt was it was almost in two different sections. The section with Omar Marmoush, where he had that really nice little partnership with Marmoush and acted as a facilitator for him. And then when Marmoush went to Manchester City halfway through last season, Ekitike stepped up as the leader of that attack, and he helped them get over the line and helped them qualify for the Champions League. He's mobile, he's tall, he's great in transition, he can play lovely little combinations in and around the penalty area, and I think that's what Liverpool are thinking of, not just a goal scorer, but a facilitator as well.
Yeah, I think Liverpool fans are very happy at the moment, understandably so. Now to Manchester United, Ruben Amorim has made it clear that a lot of players are available to leave. Garnacho, Anthony, Sancho, Malacia as well. They can all find new clubs this summer, but they're still there at the moment, Daniel. What happens if they're all still there on September the 2nd?
Not ideal for Ruben Amorim and Manchester United, because as it has been in the last few windows, it's always felt that the club have had to generate funds from selling players to really be more active in the window. Now, it doesn't feel like that pressure is necessarily on as tight in this window, but Ruben Amorim has made it very clear that those players you've just talked about there, Tom, are not part of his plans going forward. I mean, he spoke in particular about Alejandro Garnacho out of the press pack in America, that he just felt he needs a different type of leadership, a different maybe environment to really flourish as a player. And a few of the other players there as well. I mean, you see Garnacho here, of course, Chelsea very interested in him. You know, coming through some of the ranks at United, I think fans may be disappointed to see him go, but it just hasn't worked out in Amorim's system. Anthony, after a really progressive spell at Real Betis in the second half of last season, I think the issue with some of these players is, I think if your clubs around Europe, and Kevin, you can tell me any better, but even though Anthony had such a great spell and scored some great goals, I think the question is more for these clubs. They're willing to see how United will act if this goes down to the end of the window, to see if they do drop their price, because they know these players are available and they'll want to get rid of them because they won't be used at Carrington. And I think it was very interesting. Manchester United CEO Omo Barada also did an interview after the game yesterday talking about how Jason Wilcox and his recruitment team are working day and night to really get these transfers done in and out of the club.
I think there's two strands to this. I think the first is that Amorim has been so staunch in saying, right, these are the players that I don't want to take forwards. So clubs around Europe are like, great, we know you want to get them out of the door, so the price goes down automatically. But the other thing to bear in mind, and I think this is becoming increasingly an issue, clubs around Europe cannot afford Premier League wages at times. You know, some of these guys are on enormous money. Jadon Sancho is being linked with a move to Borussia Dortmund. That's fine. There's still a lot of goodwill on both sides. I'm sure they would like to bring him in. And the feeling is, certainly in German media, he would like to go there. But there's got to be a compromise then on the wages, because there's no way Dortmund are going to match what he's on at Manchester United. So there's going to have to be, I think, a sense of realism from some of these players about the clubs that are in for them and the kind of money, wage-wise, they're going to get. We've seen Marcus Rashford drop his wage down to go to Barcelona. That's the kind of thing players are going to have to do.
This morning we were talking about Marcus Rashford because he has gone to Barcelona, like you said. A lot of people said, wow, when you were explaining these issues with the registration.
Yeah, so he was asked about this, whether he was worried that Barcelona haven't yet registered him for La Liga. He said he's calm about it, he'll leave it to the club, but it is a live issue in each and every transfer window for Barcelona. Why is it an issue? Because of the debt the club has, and La Liga have very strict salary cap controls, and if they don't think you can afford a level of spending on your squad, they will not allow it. Now, we've seen this time and time again. Dani Olmo last season, there was talk of him walking away from Barcelona because they weren't able to register him. In the end, it worked out, but it needed intervention from the authorities to make that work. They brought in Joan Garcia from Espanyol, as their new first-choice goalkeeper. What about the old first-choice goalkeeper, Marc-Andre ter Stegen? They'd like to get him off the wage bill, but he doesn't want to go. So they're having to jump through all of these financial hoops. Stadium isn't finished. Costs of the stadium have gone up and up and up and up and up. Barcelona's debt problems are not finished with by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, OK, well, plenty more transfers to come. We'll look at Chelsea's business, plus one of Europe's top wingers wants out. Find out who next. Clause, there is now a broad agreement between the two clubs. It's thought that Ndidi is still considering his options because Everton are still interested. Rangers have agreed a £3 million deal to sign go-ahead Eagles winger Oliver Antman. Now, don't forget, you can keep across all of the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. Just scan the QR code on your screen, which it's not on your screen right now. And neither am I, but I am now. OK, right, you can just go to the blog. You'll know where to find it. Right, let's get more from Ipswich Town because they're progressing with talks for Ajax striker Chuba Akpom. It's understood that Ipswich are in discussions over a similar deal to the one that Ajax have agreed with Birmingham City. It's a loan with an obligation to buy for £7 million if the club are promoted to the Premier League. Akpom was due to have a medical with Birmingham today. But that's not all, because Middlesbrough and Olympiacos, they remain keen on the players as well. But at the moment, Ipswich and Birmingham, it's between those two at the moment, but there is more interest. Why is he in such demand, Kevin?
It's an interesting one, this, because he went to Ajax as part of a glut of signings that didn't really work out for them. Under Sven Mislintat, Ajax had a really poor season a couple of seasons ago. Last season, they nearly won the league, but blew it in the closing stages. But he'd gone by then because he'd been loaned out to Lille. But he was playing games at a high level for Lille. I think the versatility, I think the overall play, but he's not been a regular goalscorer probably since he was at Middlesbrough earlier in his career, because at Ajax he had a decent goal-scoring record, but not as prolific as he'd have liked to have been at that level. And it was the case for Lille as well, but he wasn't the main man in attack for Lille. That was very much Jonathan David, who's another striker Premier League clubs have missed out on, but there we go. So yeah, I can understand the interest, but in terms of being a regular goal scorer in recent seasons, that hasn't been the case.
So at the moment with Chuba Akpom, it's looking like the front runners are Birmingham City and Ipswich Town. Well, guess who play each other on the opening night of the Championship? That's right, from St Andrews, and it's live on Sky Sports Football from 7 p.m. Which side will he be on? Right, Chelsea have spent over £250 million this summer. The latest signing came yesterday in Joel Hato for £35.5 million plus add-ons. That's from Ajax. What's his best position then, Kevin?
Well, he played a big chunk at centre-back for Ajax, and then he got moved to left-back, and he did well there. And I think what probably appeals to Chelsea is his ability to play that Marc Cucurella position, not just left-back, but stepping into midfield left-back and inverting. He's shown that he's willing to do that. He's shown he has the technical quality to do that. Maybe a touch one-footed in truth, but that can be developed. And for a very young player still, he's packed a lot in. He's played a lot of games. And I think it's probably a good thing that he's played them for an Ajax team that's been really struggling, because he's had to deal with the pressure, he's had to deal with the glare of the media. Ajax is a huge club, and the pressure that comes with that is significant. So I don't think this will faze him, and he's somebody that can cover those two positions. So I think this is really smart by Chelsea.
It's interesting because I think I remember when Ajax came to England to play Aston Villa a few years ago in the Conference League, and speaking to a lot of our Dutch colleagues, he was very much tipped to be the next big star there. So he has been groomed for this moment, you could say. Very interesting. I wanted to ask you, Kevin, kind of maybe when you compare players, of course, sometimes it can be a bit difficult, but someone from the Netherlands told me maybe look at Jurrien Timber in terms of how he's maybe developed from a centre-back into, we see at Arsenal, a bit more of a full-back. And apparently they talk quite a lot about, I'm sure a lot, but also that positional change and how he's adapted to English football.
Well, it is the home of total football, and that kind of versatility, it is, if you look at players that come through the Ajax system, that is a big part of what they try and do, be comfortable in multiple positions. I think he can absolutely do that. He's not the biggest, so it'd be interesting to see, he's a good one-on-one defender, but can you translate that from the Eredivisie to the Premier League? I think he is set up to do that, but it's not certain. I think he needs a lot of games, so Chelsea are going to have to make sure that he gets enough game time. But of course, Cucurella is a lock in that left-back position. But I think it's good for Chelsea that they've now got cover and competition for Cucurella going forward.
But Chelsea are still active, aren't they, Dan? They always are. What's the latest with Xavi Simons?
Yeah, well, very interesting with Xavi. I mean, they remain in talks with RB Leipzig over a potential move for the young midfielder, but I think we look at indications and maybe signs that a move could potentially happen. Xavi was left out of the RB Leipzig squad against Atalanta over the weekend, and he's, I think, been pretty clear of his desire to move away from Leipzig. I think European football will be a big reason as to why, and he will get that, of course, at Chelsea. And I think for me, it makes sense when you look at Chelsea's perspective. I think sometimes they can be, maybe targeted a little bit. Do they need this player? But I think with Xavi, absolutely, because where he can play in this Chelsea team, in that 10, or even on the out wide a little bit, it really takes off that pressure of someone like Cole Palmer to be that creative force. But also, I suppose the other side of that, Kevin, is will he be okay being a bit more of a rotation player with all the attacking players Chelsea now have, like Jamie Gittins, for example?
That's the big question, because he hasn't had to deal with that at PSV, where he was absolutely the main man. He hasn't had to deal with that at RB Leipzig, because he's been a lock for that first team all the way through. So this is very different. I think Leipzig always planned to sell him, whether they qualified for Europe or not. I think he was always going to be a player that they tried to move for big money. Same with Sesko, they were the two. Because you look at Leipzig, that is the business model. That is what they do. We've seen it time and time again. They've moved players on for big money. And they were the two. I think he's ready for that step. But it'll be really interesting in terms of the intangibles, in terms of playing for the team, attitude. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but a debate in German media has been persistent about, is that an area of his game he can improve? And you look at his body language sometimes, doesn't always look the happiest when he plays.
You say he's ready for this moment. I just wondered, because again, Kevin, you all know much better than I, but he had, this move back to PSG, where it felt like that was his time again at a bigger club. So do you think he'll be able to handle the pressure of playing for one of England's biggest, playing in some of the biggest competitions in the world, and the physicality?
The physicality is definitely an issue, because players will try and kick him out the game. He doesn't always respond too well to that. So that's something he's going to have to deal with. And this is where you find out how good a player he's going to be, because he's been dominant in the Eredivisie. He's played really well in the Bundesliga. Now can he handle that step up? And if he does, that could be the key to him really being a lock for the Dutch going forward to the World Cup potentially.
Dan, everyone talks about the amount of money that Chelsea spend. There are a couple of loans going out as well. Amanda Broye is going out on loan to Burnley. Mark Gue going out on loan to Sunderland. In terms of sales, they are actually recouping some money, which sometimes doesn't get talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to give clubs credit where it's due. And you look at, just this summer, purely at what Chelsea have done in this window. I mean, to sell Noni Madueke, they made a very healthy profit on him on that move to Arsenal. João Felix, I think, again, really did well to recoup such a fee for a player that really didn't work out on his return last year. I mean, Jurje Petrovic signed from the MLS and really did have a spell last year, of course, in goal for Chelsea. But £25 million, again, I think is pretty impressive by Chelsea. And you look in recent windows, likes of Mason Mount, and even this window as well, they still have quite a few players that could still make that move. The likes of Raheem Sterling, Renato Vega, Axel Disasi we saw on loan at Aston Villa on the second half of last season. So there's still quite a few sales. Carney Chukwuemeka as well, who spent last season on loan at Dortmund. There still feels like there's a few players there, as you can see, Kevin, that I think Europe's finest may fancy taking a punt on.
Worth a fair chunk.
Absolutely. And Bayern are exploring players who could play in that 10 role as that second striker, and he could be one they turn to if they can't get Nick Woltemade, who we'll talk about in a bit, over the line. Chukwuemeka is somebody that Dortmund would absolutely love to loan again, maybe with a view to a permanent switch. That's something they would like to do. Just a word on João Felix, who is one of the most baffling players, because I love watching him. I think he's a sensational player to watch. But there was some quite revealing quotes from his old Atletico Madrid teammate Saúl Ñíguez this week, when he talked about talent without effort being worthless. He talked about the fact that other Atletico players had tried to help him, but he didn't really want that help. He was quite damning about João Felix, and I think he's now at a bit of a crossroads. Is he going to be the player we all thought he could be when he broke through at Benfica, or is he just going to fade away?
Right, OK, plenty more still to come on Transfer Talk, because, Kevin, we're going to be, in the next part, talking about your top 5 players, or top 5 transfers, in Europe. So you ready for that?
I am.
Good. We'll see you soon. Right, these 5 players behind us, they are there because they are Kevin's top 5 transfer picks in Europe in terms of players to keep an eye on over the next month until their transfer deadline day. Right, Kevin, let's start with the position. It's been a flavour of this window, the centre forward, and you've picked one over there from the Bundesliga.
I have. Nick Woltemade. Think Peter Crouch, that kind of vibe. Big, tall guy, but lovely touch. Goes on these slaloming runs, has really exploded in the last year. Because when he signed from Werder Bremen for Stuttgart, he'd scored goals at a lower league level with Elversberg, but in the Bundesliga he just hadn't done it. And just all of a sudden, as part of a very good Stuttgart team, just started scoring goal after goal after goal. He's got as many nicknames as goals, the Swabian Ibrahimovic, Volta Messi, he's had all kinds. But he's somebody that Bayern would absolutely love to sign. And their need for him is all the more pressing because Jamal Musiala's out for the next few months with a serious injury that he picked up at the Club World Cup. They want backup for Harry Kane, but he can also play at 10. Even though he's so tall, he can actually play really well in the 10. So he's one that Bayern would love to sign, but Stuttgart aren't playing ball. They want a big, big fee.
Yeah, we had a striker at Sunderland called Ross Stewart. We used to call him the Loch Ness Drogba. He went to Southampton. I miss him. Right, let's hear for your next player, a winger that's been linked with a few clubs, including a few in the Premier League.
Yeah, Malik Fofana, who I think is so much fun to watch. Really exciting, explosive winger. Lyon admit that there's lots of interest. He's been linked with Everton. He's been linked with clubs in Germany as well. He was linked with Bayern before they brought Luis Diaz in. I'm not sure Lyon are going to be able to hold on to him. Very raw, still a lot of development to do, but I think there's lots and lots of talent there.
Right, back to the Bundesliga, another attacking player that's gone a bit under the radar.
Yeah, Paul Nabel, his breakthrough season arrived last term. He helped Mainz qualify for Europe. He's short in stature, but he's got a big heart. He's got great technique as well. Always trying to be active, always trying to affect the game. Bo Henriksen, his coach at Mainz, said if he played for Dortmund or if he played for Bayern, people would be talking about him being an 80 million, 100 million euro player. That might be a bit over the top, but I think there's a really, really promising player there. Will probably end up playing for Germany at international level, but also qualifies for the Republic of Ireland. So that's one to watch as well.
He does. It's through his maternal grandmother. I've just looked it up. So if he does end up choosing Ireland, it won't be Powell anymore. I think I think we'll be calling him Paul, I would say. Right, you mentioned earlier about Barcelona in need of sales. And that guy there, you might be on the move, you're thinking?
Yeah, Marc Casado, who's a defensive midfielder, lovely passer of the ball, good tackler as well. He would love to stay at Barcelona, but there's lots of players that would love to stay at Barcelona. Lionel Messi couldn't even stay at Barcelona when he wanted to, and he got shoved out to PSG. So Barcelona do need to balance the books, and because Marc Bernal, who's of a similar mould, is back from a serious injury, the feeling is that Casado could be one of the ones who's sacrificed. There's been talk that he's available for 30 million euro. He's been linked with Atletico Madrid. He might not want to go, but he might be one that has to.
We're going to come back to the last player there, Kevin, because there's some breaking news. It's big breaking news regarding, well, Everton will be very interested in this, Everton fans, because they've had a second offer for Tyler Dibling rejected by Southampton. The offer was understood to be worth an initial £35 million plus another £8 million in add-ons. Southampton's valuation of the winger is thought to be £45 million, all right? So that the other one was just short, but of course we don't know the structure of the add-ons. It remains to be seen whether Everton will follow up with another bid, but that second offer for Tyler Dibling rejected by Southampton. Everton haven't been able to make a breakthrough yet. OK, Daniel, we saw him really break through last season for Southampton. Very impressive. And I can understand why Southampton would want to keep him. Of course, Everton in the Premier League and Southampton aren't.
Absolutely, and we heard from David Moyes this morning talking about how he wants at least 10 signings for this window. He wants those reinforcements, and having this second offer rejected for Tyler Dibling, I mean, at least shows intent that Tyler Dibling is one of their number one choices in this window. As you said there, Tom, I mean, just 19 years old. I watched Southampton quite a lot, you know, quite luckily, Kevin, as part of our job, we get to watch so much football, and any time Dibling either came off the bench or started a game, he's just one of those players who you could support any club, but just gives you that buzz, gives you that electricity, the way he can weave past players. And I think for Everton, they perhaps lack that type of player, other than maybe Iliman Ndiaye a little bit. They really lack that creative flair. And I think really for this Everton side, if they can get closer to that £45 million evaluation Southampton have on Dibling, it would be a huge signing for them.
He's a phenomenal footballer. One to keep an eye on, by the way, is RB Leipzig with him, because they might suddenly get a cash injection if they sell Sesko. He's a player that's been on their radar for a while. They would love to bring him in.
Right, we'll keep you up to date with that one. Let's quickly go back to your ones to watch, Kevin, because the most familiar face that was up there was, of course, Donnarumma.
And his situation's really interesting because PSG want to bring in Lille's Lucas Chevalier. They see him as the future of their goalkeeping position. Bit better with his feet, it has to be said. Donnarumma only has 1 year left on his deal. They haven't agreed a new contract. So where does that leave him? Is he only going to be there for a year longer and then he goes as a free? Or a club's going to actually try and sign him by the end of the window if Chevalier is installed as the number one?
Right, talking about one of the most in-demand wingers in about 15 seconds, Kevin. Ademola Lookman, what's the latest?
He's pushing for a move from Atalanta to Inter. Atalanta not playing ball. He's released a transfer statement and a big statement on social media saying that the club are blocking him from making a move that had been agreed. Right, OK, Kevin, fantastic as ever. Same for you, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for your company today. Just a reminder of that breaking news, by the way, that Everton have had a second offer for Tyler Dibling rejected by Southampton. We understand it was £35 million plus 8 in Southampton add-on. Southampton have said no.